All right, welcome Hillbridge students. Today, part 3 of the causes of the American Revolution. And let's get started. Learning targets today. What we're going to do is we're going to discuss the following laws or following incidents that occurred in the colonies that just caused England and the colonies to drift further and further apart from each other. We're going to learn about the Boston Massacre and its causes. We're going to talk about the Tea Act, the Boston Tea Party, and the laws that resulted as a result of the Boston Tea Party, the Intolerable Acts. We're going to talk about the First Continental Congress, and then we're going to end with Lexington and Concord. So let's get started. So the Boston Massacre. What was happening was with each law that was being passed, and the colonial protests that came afterwards, Britain started sending more troops over. And a lot of this is happening in the New England colonies. Matter of fact, the main area is going to be Boston. You have the Boston Massacre, you have the Boston Tea Party. And so what's happening is there is a building in Boston called the Customs Office. And it's where all the tax collectors work out of. That's their offices. And you have soldiers that are stationed outside. And one day what happens is you get a group of colonists coming and they start verbally assaulting the soldiers. They're yelling at them. And then it turns to more than just yelling. They start throwing garbage and they start throwing ice balls. I don't know about you. When I was younger, I'd have snowball fights with my friends. Ice balls hurt. And so garbage is being thrown, ice balls are being thrown. And at some point, a British soldier fires their gun. And it's followed by more shots. Was it on purpose? We don't know. Did he conked in the head with an ice ball and accidentally fire his rifle? Could have happened. We don't know. But when it was all done, you've got 5 citizens that are killed, 5 colonists are killed, and others are injured. And now, the Sons of Liberty called it a massacre. Now, when I hear the word massacre, I'm thinking a lot of people are being killed. Here you have 5. And was it all the British soldiers' fault? Or did the colonists start this one? Either way, the colonists are going to use this as propaganda. Paul Revere, a member of the Sons of Liberty, a famous silversmith, created an engraving showing the Boston Massacre. And he made sure that it made its way to all the other colonies so they could see what the British were doing to the colonists. And if you look at the picture, it looks like the British officer is giving the order to fire on a group of harmless colonists, and that all the British soldiers then lined up and shot together just like they would in battle. And then you have the colonists on the other side. Was this a true depiction of what occurred at that event? No. But this is what was given to all of the colonies. All right. So was it a massacre or was it self-defense? One of the leading citizens of Boston, John Adams, he will go on to become our 2nd president of the United States, wanted to make sure that he could prove that the British soldiers could get a fair trial in the colonies. He became their lawyer, and they were put on trial, and they claimed self-defense. John Adams was not well liked for doing this, but he wanted to make sure that the English soldiers received that fair trial. When a trial was over, 6 of the soldiers were found innocent, 2 were found guilty of manslaughter, meaning that they didn't intend to cause death, but it happened. And so this was an event. It happened in Boston. It was used as propaganda, and this one really is going to drive England and the colonists apart. Now we've talked about, let's see, Grenville was a prime minister, and then Townsend was a prime minister. Now you got Lord North in charge. And Lord North, Apologize for that. Convinces Parliament to cancel all taxes on goods. All of them, except one. Tea, all right? And tea is the big one, and the king wanted one tax left just to show that he had the power to tax people. We'll hear from the king at the end of this PowerPoint today. So just to show that he had the right to tax the colonists, they left one tax, they put it on tea. And then they passed something called the Tea Act. There was a company called the British East India Tea Company. It controlled the tea trade. It sold tea to India, all around the English colonial empire. And under the Tea Act, Lord North gave the East India Tea Company complete rights to selling tea to the colonists. Now remember, tea is being taxed, the colonists aren't buying it. Instead, what they're doing is they're drinking smuggled tea from Holland, all right? Under the Tea Act, what they did is they made British East India tea cheaper than the smuggled tea, just so that they could sell it. The company needed to sell their tea, they were losing money, and they figured, hey, we'll sneak this one past the colonists. It's cheaper than the smuggled tea, but the colonists will go for it. Colonists still saw this as a tax on tea. Not only that, there was a lot of people living in the colonies who sold tea for a living, and now they're out of work because the East India Tea Company is the only company that gets to sell tea. So one of the reasons I tell you about the Tea Act is because a lot of you are going to say, well, tea was taxed under the Tea Act. No, tea was taxed under the Townshend Acts. And so just in case that's a question for you. All right? But now this tea is going to become a problem. It's going to lead to a little party, the Boston Tea Party. And here's what's happening. 3 tea ships arrive in Boston. And the colonists are like, go home. We don't want your tea. Turn around and go home. The governor of the governor of Massachusetts, the royal governor of Massachusetts says, no, I want you to unload your tea. So now you got these ships' captains, they don't know what to do. Colonists are on one hand telling, get out of here, and on the other hand, the governor's saying, hey, I want it unloaded. So you have this problem, and everybody in Boston knows what's going on. And so the Sons of Liberty come up with a plan. At nighttime, they dressed as Native Americans. I don't know why they did that. But they dressed as Native Americans. They boarded the boats, and they were given strict directions. Do not destroy any other cargo. Do not take any other cargo. We are just here to destroy the tea. And they dump all the tea into Boston Harbor, 342 crates of tea worth what would be today $1 million. So they destroy English property. All right? King's not going to be happy. So the king and parliament, they are not happy whatsoever. And so they passed a new set of laws called the Intolerable Acts. And it's a series of 4 laws passed against Massachusetts. That is the colony in which Boston is located. And the Intolerable Acts are passed to punish Boston for the Boston Tea Party. And 4 things are done. 1, they close the port of Boston to all ship activity. Ships cannot go in or out of Boston Harbor unless the British say so. Now think about it. People who live in Boston, they're fishermen. They can't go. They're traders. Can't do it. All right? So a lot of people are now going to be out of work. And the Intolerable Acts are punishing Boston until they pay for the tea. All right? The second thing is that Massachusetts is now placed under British control. All right? The British Army is now in charge of Massachusetts. And they're not allowed to hold town meetings anymore. And that's the big thing. When people got their news back then, they got it at town meetings. Those are now banned. All right? Third thing, any British soldier who was on trial in the colonies or in Massachusetts, their trial would be moved to England. They didn't think that they could get a fair trial even though John Adams had provided them with just that. And then the fourth thing, a new quartering act. Now we had talked about the original quartering act in an earlier presentation. This new quartering act, they could place British soldiers inside people's homes. People didn't have to say it was okay. They could place them inside the homes. This is going to not drive the colonies farther apart. It's going to unite the colonies. This was England is going to probably regret this, because what they did was they caused the colonies to somewhat start uniting. All right. So the colonies are now going to send food and money to Boston. They're going to stop selling British goods in all 13 of the colonies. And now they're talking about, hey, maybe we should have a meeting where we get delegates from all the colonies together, and we can talk about our issues with England and the king. And that is exactly what they're going to do. The First Continental Congress is going to be formed. They're going to meet in Philadelphia. 12 of the 13 colonies are going to be present. The only one not there is Georgia. They said that, hey, whatever you come up with, we agree. And they do come up with some things. And the big thing, one of the big things about the First Continental Congress is now you got some of the delegates calling themselves Americans. All right? They're English citizens, but now they're identifying themselves as Americans and claiming that, hey, why don't we work on maybe forming our own country? That's going to start coming. So they send a message to the king. This is what they agree to do. Let's send a message to the king showing him how he's not treating us right, and he's a reasonable guy. He'll listen. They boycott British goods. They tell the colonies, hey, why don't you start forming your own militias? A militia is an army of citizen soldiers, just in case we might need you. Good idea. And then they say, hey, we'll meet again in May of 1775. Just if things aren't going right, let's just meet again in May of 1775. Well, they're not going to get that chance because something's going to happen. So the colonies form the militias, and like I said, it's a army of citizen soldiers, and it's made up of what we call Minutemen. Minutemen were colonists trained to be ready at a minute's notice. They jump out of bed, they get dressed, they grab their rifle, and they are ready. So the different colonies are now training militias because things between England and the colonies are getting worse and worse by the day. And so this comes down to the Midnight Riders. Each side had spies. All right? The British had spies, the colonists had spies, and they were always trying to find out information about the other. British spies find out that two things are happening. In the city of Lexington, you have two of the leaders of the Sons of Liberty. You have John Hancock and you have Sam Adams. They're in Lexington. They're wanted men. The British are looking for them. And then in Concord, another city nearby, in Concord, the colonists had stolen some weapons and ammunition and had hidden them there. And so now the British want to take care of a couple of these goals here. And so at nighttime, trying to do this very quietly, 700 British soldiers, they jump into boats and they're going to row a short ways away, and then they're going to march 20 miles by land to go to Lexington and Concord to check these things out. The colonists, they had a plan. They knew that the British might be doing something like this, so they came up with a plan where if the British were going to be marching by land, they would put one lantern in the Old North Church. It was the tallest building in Boston. If they were going by boat, you put two lanterns in there. There's a famous poem, one by land, two by seas, and it's a long poem. I'll tell you about it later. So they do. They put two lanterns in there, and the British march, and what they think is a secret mission, kind of, with 700 British soldiers. But when those lanterns are put up there, that is the cue for Paul Revere. Paul Revere is famous for being a midnight rider. It was his job, once he saw those lanterns, to ride out around the countryside yelling, "The British are coming! The British are coming!" What that intended to do is to wake up those Minutemen get them ready. And so that's what happened. But Paul Revere is the guy who gets all the credit. There were two other gentlemen by the name of William Dawes and Sam Prescott, Dr. Sam Prescott. What happens to the three of them? Well, Paul Revere is going to be captured at some point, so he doesn't make it all the way to Concord like he needs to. William Dawes, he falls off his horse. He has to walk back to Boston. Not a happy guy. Dr. Samuel Prescott is the one who's able to make it all the way and do that. Recently, I've read reports where there's like 30 other people who were riding around yelling, "The British are coming, the British are coming." I'm not sure if that's true or not. Kind of makes sense because a lot of people are going to be woken up. When the British soldiers get to Lexington, Hancock and Adams, they're gone. However, waiting for the British soldiers in Lexington are going to be 77 men, members of the Lexington militia, farmers, tradesmen, standing in line with rifles against 700 of the best soldiers in the world. The British soldiers didn't even take them seriously. They're just like, hey, go home and whatever. But a shot is accidentally fired. The British accidentally fire a gun, and each side starts firing. When it's all done, 8 colonists are dead, 10 are wounded. The British just continue on to Concord. All right? But something tells me that after that happened, word's going to get out about what the British did. So on to Concord, and the British troops reach Concord. The weapons and ammunition aren't there. The British search for a few hours. Then they turn to leave, go over this bridge leading out of Concord. And what's waiting outside of Concord? A lot of militia, a lot of Minutemen. And the British now are forced to hurry their butts back any way they can, all the way to Boston. As they go back that 20 miles to Boston, you've got militiamen hiding behind rocks, hiding behind trees, hiding in barns, hiding in houses, firing at the British soldiers. Okay? And 250 British soldiers are going to be killed or wounded on the way back to Boston. British soldiers, because of the red uniforms, were also called redcoats or lobsterbacks. We're at war. Those shots, Lexington and Concord, known as the shot heard around the world, the colonists were now at war with England. And that leaves us with the king. The king's not too happy, and the king has a message for the colonists.
You say the price of my love's not a price that you're willing to pay. You cry in your tea, but you hurl in the sea when you see me go by. Why so sad? Remember we made an arrangement when you went away. Now you're making me mad. Remember, despite our estrangement, I'm your man. You'll be back, soon you'll see. You'll remember you belong to me. You'll be back, time will tell. You'll remember that I served you well. Oceans rise, empires fall. We have seen each other through it all. And when push comes to shove, I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love. Da 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 da. You say our love is draining and you can't go. You'll be the one complaining when till my dying days. When you're gone, I get mad. So don't throw away this thing we had. 'Cause when push comes to shove, I will kill your friends and family to remind you of my love. Da 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 yada da 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 yada da. Everybody do.
All right, so a little message from the king, and that's going to conclude our lessons on the causes of the American Revolution. Once again, you just join my YouTube classroom, and you'll see videos that we've already covered. Go to my Google Classroom, you'll see PowerPoints, you'll see videos, you'll see study guides, all you need to know. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll be glad to help you. All right. Talk to you later.